Let's go!
Oh, this is going to become a thing now.
Let's go!
Okay, coaching people.
Coaching people. So, welcome everyone in another episode of the thing we do.
Yeah, we don't have a name for it yet, although you will probably know a name if you're listening to this by now.
And yeah, go on.
We were going to talk a bit about coaching people because this is something we stumbled on in the last episode, and it's like something that maybe requires a little bit of talking about, right? Because it's something that probably doesn't get spoken about enough, to be honest, when it comes to learning about dog training. Very often we focus on the dog training, and there are these kind of skills that are like peripheral that kind of don't really get spoken about a lot, but oftentimes are actually really, really important.
I would argue even more important than, or maybe like equally important. That was we can talk about that a little bit later, about the fact that I had that question quite late in my career, that what is more important, trained dog or happy customer, right? Or happy person, happy dog owner, right? And I think a lot of dog trainers, I mentioned that in the last episode, they are stepping into dog training because they don't want to deal with people. They just want to be with the animals, with the puppies, and playing with the puppies all day. And they perceive that job as, it, where actually, unless you do residential training for someone and you never see the customer, which would be crazy thing, you need to have like set of skills to work with people, and very often it's just like training people, not really training dogs.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a good point you make. It is arguably more important, or certainly that's the kind of scale we're talking about. Like, it's super, super important. And the interesting thing is, I think because there is a bit of a lack of education on this subject, a lot of us are kind of self-taught. I know I'm actually quite self-taught when it comes to coaching people. I feel like I do a pretty good job, but I don't really have anything to measure myself off of. But I can only share the things that have kind of worked well for me. And hopefully if you're like a professional educator, you don't think I'm some kind of caveman.
Yeah, like my experience was, I never thought about that, the human part of this equation, but I was lucky enough that mentored the guy that I learned from early on. That was the very first person that was teaching me about the dog training. He was very talented in dog training, but also he showed me you can build very nice relationships with people. And for me, it was, that came in the package. And I, beforehand, I was one of those weirdos that I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to, be salesy, or those interactions were I wasn't convinced to for them. But like I said, I was lucky enough that I met the guy that he showed me you can have amazing relationships with the clients, and you can build those relationships, and you want to motivate them. You kind of want to tell them when in proper way when they are fucking things up without offending them, etc., etc. So I had very good example, but of course, there is no I never heard about any sort of seminar for dog trainers about people skills and dealing with the customer. We are learning it from somewhere, right? From other professions as well.
Being a good dog trainer definitely does help. I'm not, obviously that is still really important. I feel like sometimes if I go, probably the classic example of this is with dogs that are really bad at dog greetings, for example. They get super excited, or maybe they have a history of aggression or something like that. When I come into the house, if I get that bit right and the dog is behaving really well, I get off onto such a good start, because the client is fucking hell, this guy is incredible. And then there's a hunger, they want to connect with you, because how the hell did you do that? So being a good dog trainer does help, because I think sometimes when people see you get a result, then it opens up curiosity, and they almost want to like you at that point, So I definitely think that does help, but obviously that's not all of it.
not, like definitely not. And then really hard to put the weight on either side, because behind every dog there is a customer, and you can be excellent, amazing dog trainer, but if you can't speak to people, or you cannot motivate them, or you cannot make them to like you in any sort of shape or form, then they're not going to pay you. Then your skill is a little bit wasted. And we have like other spectrum where there are people with amazing people skills, and then they will be very charming, very articulate, but the skill set in dog training is very, very poor. What I would say, if it goes for dog training, I would recommend to any dog trainer to do boarding and training for at least a while. The longer, the better, because that will teach you hands-on, right? How to train the dog, and you will see what is working, what is not working, what is, you will be able to imagine live with different type of dogs with different sort of problems, where when we just advise people how to deal with the dog, you don't get that clear picture. Like for me, it was like huge eye-opener when I started to do like boarding and training, and then it was like, okay, so that doesn't make any sense. I cannot squeeze that technique in my everyday life, right? So that would be my strong advice. If you don't want to do boarding and training, get the dog from the rescue and train it, and do something good for the for the world, right? But it really sharpen your skill set. But if it goes for dealing with people, what would you say? Like I'm terrible at dealing with the customers, or I cannot sell shit, or they don't like me, or I'm this weirdo that just wants to be with the dogs, but I need to deal with the customers. What would you be your best advice?
Well, we can go through it today. I think one of the things I do a lot now without even thinking about it is building rapport. So like I try to look for things that they might be interested in, that either we have a mutual interest in, or I can just express some. Like I'm a pretty curious person, so even if I'm not like massively interested in something, I'm still kind of we can have a conversation about it. But it works better if you have something you're mutually interested in. So like, for example, you go into the house, like for me, I quite like reading, and loads of people have bookshelves. So like, I'll be like, oh, you read that book, and then we just instantly you start like talking about a book, and you start building rapport. Or like maybe they're wearing a t-shirt of like a band, or like a classic. Maybe it's not so relevant anymore because it hasn't been so big recently, but like Marvel was big for ages. Loads of people were really into like Captain America and stuff like that. So I could kind of connect with people on that. Or or I ask one of my trainers takes piss out of me for this, but very frequently I'd be like, oh, so what do you do? And then they will be like, because it actually gives me a little bit of an insight, because then if they say something that is, I might be able to bounce off it, like for example, like maybe they're like, oh, I'm a beautician. I'm like, oh, my mum runs a beauty salon, and then you start but you're looking for something that you can kind of catch on to, that you have some kind of shared experience with, or you have some curiosity about. And then I really think that helps build rapport.
Definitely. But also, not looking very, very far, you and your client, you are dog owners, right? And then you have like at least one thing in common.
Great point.
Right? And you can, even if, unless you're a dog trainer without the dog, but then, come on, man.
No, I totally agree. And that really helps when it comes to breeds very often. Or it'd be like,
oh yeah.
My dogs are all kinds of dogs, but based on who I'm talking to. Yeah. So it's like if I'm talking to a Malinois person, my dog is a Malinois. If I'm talking to a German Shepherd person, my dog's a German Shepherd. But more than that, even with my little dogs, who are like Terrier Chihuahua mixes. If I'm talking to a Chihuahua person, I have Chihuahuas. If I'm talking to a Terrier person, I have Terriers. Or even if it's a dog I don't have, like, God, I'm trying to think of an example. But maybe it's a dog like, I don't know, we've got a flat coat retriever or something. Yeah. Oh, I used to work with flat coat. I know a few flat coats. I used to work with a dog person with a bred of flat coat. And then you start like bonding. As a dog trainer, you've probably experienced most breeds. You probably have some kind of story.
Yeah.
Like lurchers, for example. I've never owned lurchers, but when I was a dog walker, I used to walk a group of lurchers. So then you go, I used to walk a group of lurchers. They're so, and then you just start like riffing,
Yeah, and like from the start is worth to compliment them on something, right? Then they will feel much better about themselves and they will like you more. And, there is probably a lot of books on this, like, where you have pretty much lined out those people's skills, which we mentioned that book that I should have title for
You forgot it
today.
again.
Yeah, I forgot it again.
You were talking about how to win friends and influence people, which I think is Stephen Covey, but I could be getting that wrong. But
So, read that book. Like that was, I got that book from my ex-girlfriend because she has noticed the problem coming, right? And she gave me that book and then I read that book and then that was kind of eye-opening that it doesn't have to come naturally from you. It's a skill that you can learn and it's a skill that you definitely need to get.
yeah, it's also quite fun, I think. I don't know, maybe it's not fun for everyone, but for me, I find it quite fun to like connect with people and try to find that like mutual interest. And
Yeah, but like I've met quite a lot of people that they wanted to go into the dog training because they don't like human interactions. And I think we can see that it reflects in our profession where people are really focusing on the dogs and they love dogs, but they seem like you don't like other people. Like, why do you put those mean comments everywhere?
I'm like sometimes when people see me teach in a one-to-one basis or classes or probably even doing stuff like this podcast, sometimes people think I'm an extroverted person or like I spend a lot of time socializing with people or something, but actually outside of work I'm actually really introverted. I don't really talk to many people. I don't like, not to sound like a sado, but I don't have a lot of friends. Like because I enjoy like my own company, like I just kind of I'm just the kind of person that I just like to chill out and like I like my own company, I remember going to a conference once, right? And the night before, I was at this conference. The night before, we were all having conversations and we were talking. And in the morning, I went down to breakfast and there was someone else from the night before there. I was sat on the same table and I was just kind of like eating breakfast silently. And they were like, "Is everything okay?"
Yeah.
And like, "Are you?" And they were really like miffed by it. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And then we ended up talking about it. And it's like, for me personally, I'm totally comfortable in silence and like not talking.
Oh, yeah.
But some people hate that. And some people, if you don't talk and you're like in the same room, like they think that you hate them or something. Whereas for me, I'm very happy just sat there in my own world.
I think I would like, if I have to look at myself, I would say I'm pretty much the same way. However, I love my customers. I really like them. I love doing workshops. I love doing, like, I leave everything over there, but it just cost me a lot of energy. I think it is just that thing that, like some, apparently this is like the difference between extrovert and introvert, that extroverts will get the energy from interactions and introvert will spend energy. And I think I'm spending more, but I love them. Like, honestly, like I love every workshop and, everybody are like, if I'm in the good mood, probably I'm on my way back from the workshop.
My, one of our instructors said this to me at one point, because she said, when I first came, I really thought I would never be able to teach classes because I thought I'm a very introverted person. I just thought that just is not going to suit me at all. But I got a lot of confidence from hanging out with the other trainers because I realized, actually, you're pretty much all introverts. As soon as the clients go out of the hall, it's like it's not like it's different. It's you're like presenting a version of yourself, and it's not like being inauthentic or anything like that. It's just presenting a different version of yourself when you're teaching. you can kind of get into that teacher mode, you know?
And then I've got like different versions, depends of the languages I speak in. So
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about languages.
it is. And it is interesting that I've got only couple friends that I will feel like comfortable to speak in and be in two languages. They know me from Polish and from English. Where when I'm in the Polish mode, I feel like I'm almost a different person. Where versus when I speak in English, or I'm trying.
That I've heard a lot of people say that.
It's there was some research about that, I'm sure, but it is. And then with like it's a little bit awkward when, let's say, I know someone, like we've been speaking only in Polish, and then they know like the Polish Alex, and then we go to the English language setting, and it feels a little bit awkward, almost, right? When and like I said, like there are only a couple of people that I can feel comfortable in both.
Yeah.
But it's not being authentic. It is just like one thing. It's a skill, but also it's just the way you do, right, with your customers or with
totally. When I teach, I'm still me. Like I'm not like pretending to be someone else entirely. It's just
unless you're a sociopath.
Yeah, that's it.
And there, I'm sure there are, like in our profession.
Here's another thing that I think people oftentimes overlook in the beginning, especially when you're teaching classes, but anything really, is when I try to teach something, I explain how, like what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. And I think that's really important because sometimes when I watch other people teach, maybe they'll be teaching something like a hand touch or something like that. And you can see the dog owner thinking like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? And like to us, it's immediately like we understand why. But there are so many people that don't know why because they haven't like got to that stage in their dog training. And I think that's something that people oftentimes miss when they're teaching. So I always tell people we teach what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, why we're teaching it.
This is very good. And we are stepping into the subject of how to construct the training session, but people should know why they're putting effort in something and what is the application of it, right? Definitely.
There's many times when people come to classes or do a one-to-one with them as well, and I'll show them something like a hand touch is just a classic example, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we did that in puppy class, but I didn't realize you used it for this." It's
all right.
No one ever told them why they were doing it.
It's a lot of our job. Like our job is in big part coaching people and building relationship with them and motivating them. And especially since right now I coach a couple people in the sport, and especially in the protection sports, this is like whole another story. Like the personalities, right? I think you have to have like certain personality to step into that game of protection sports. I think I really believe that, right? And like in any sport, there is a lot of ego in it, but this is the game we are playing. But like I know of the very good competitors or very good trainers that they cannot coach people, or like they cannot pass the knowledge. So you can have like amazing knowledge, but if you don't know how to pass it to your client or the person that you are coaching, it's you are only halfway there. But also learning how to motivate people, or how to keep them kind of accountable for everything, for bringing the progress, right? Because it can be that you spend 6 months with someone and you don't have a progress. And why? Are you a bad dog trainer, or you didn't get to that person, so that person is doing the thing?
There are many times, I think, if someone isn't used to teaching or they're not a particularly skilled teacher, there are many times in dog training where you do something but you don't actually know you're doing it. I even get caught up on this every now and then.
All right.
I'll be demonstrating something, and someone will say, "Oh, why did you do that?" And I was like, I do this is subconscious. I didn't even realize that I was doing that. So that can happen, but oftentimes I think there's lots of little details like that maybe people aren't even aware. You can definitely build a proficiency in your practical skills where sometimes you're not even like aware that you're doing something.
Oh yeah.
You know?
For example, if it goes for play, writing a book taught me quite a lot because I had to sit and, reflect on every single move and, break something into almost mathematical terms, which is very emotional. And I think it applies to dog training in general. It's not only technical thing, mechanical thing. There are dog emotions that we want to influence or how the dog feels, etc., etc. And it's very, even you can have that gift, whispering or this sort of thing, but you need to be able to explain that. So for people, it makes total sense, right? And explain every move. And for example, with the dog sports or with the play, whatever I do, I really reflect on it, how I can pass it to someone. So it's not based on my feeling or on my intuition. It's like we are doing this and that. And I think that helped me quite a lot with working with people.
Yeah, I mean, there are times where I deliberately leave things out, but I think that's different when you're aware of what you're leaving out. Like, for example, there are sometimes I want to build something up gradually. And like we talk about shaping dogs, and I think sometimes you shape people. Like there are some things you might teach people that actually, like if you just dump it all on them, like they're not going to succeed. Like you kind of need to like gradually start to build it up. Like for example, for me, an easy example is lead walking training. Some of the lead walking training I do, and maybe we could get into it at another point, but like if I try to just show everything at once, sometimes people can get overwhelmed and then they don't get it so much.
But you sound smart.
Versus if I actually just like break it down, just like show them like one bit, get them doing that, and then I start showing them more, like only over the course of like 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
But just by breaking it down a little bit more like that, it seemed to have more success than just like jamming everything at once.
Definitely. Throwing too much too soon most likely will confuse people. I have that a lot of in the IGP training when I'm like teaching people to train their dog for a sport, and then there is a lot of moving elements over there that we have to take care of just to bring the best performance of the dog. But like if someone is at the beginning of the dog sport journey, they are not ready yet to sing, like that is not gonna sink in. They cannot wrap the head around all those elements. And then I get that question quite a lot. Oh, like you were doing that, why didn't you tell me? Because I cannot give you 50 things at one time, because you're not gonna remember a single thing. You have to be good at teaching and coaching, so people will progress as well. Dogs will progress.
This is a beginner mistake for sure, like to overwhelm clients like this. I remember back to the first one-to-one session I ever did, and it always stuck in my mind because I didn't feel like it went very well. I mean, not surprising, it's the first time I ever did it. I was really young as well. I was like probably like 16 or something, like crazy young. And I was working with this lady who had a schnauzer, and she wanted her dog to do things, but she was one of those people where you show her something and she'd be like, that won't work for me. Like, I can't do that because of this. And like, because this was like my first session, I really wanted her to feel happy about it. I kept trying to like come up with different ways that she could do it. Right. And I would never do that now. Like, I would be a little bit more like I would, obviously I would be diplomatic about it, but I would definitely approach that in a different way, versus back then I was like just trying to find a way that would work for her. And it wasn't even that it didn't work for her, it's just that she was one of those people that like automatically tries to find a flaw in it. And I ended up like trying to do like fucking lead walking with a target stick or some fucking crazy shit because I was trying to appease this lady.
Yeah.
And that comes with experience as well, like knowing how to handle someone that's a little bit more difficult like that, or is trying to find, like, there are people that you come across that they will try to find that, like, no, that will never work for me. You know, knowing how to handle
one of the early goals in my career was like I wanted to get to the point where I can say no to the client, so I don't have to take every single job and please every single person. And I want to train with people that they want to train with me, right? Then you don't have that issue, right? Or if you have some, if somebody comes to you not because of, oh, you are a local dog trainer, because they come to you because they want to train with you, it's so much easier. And this is the marketing, apparently, right? So you don't have to prove yourself, and you don't have to convince the person that whatever you are telling them to do is like, this is the right thing. But probably right now I would say, then I can't help you.
There are, and suddenly the attitude very often changes at that point. But there are situations where you have to draw a line in the sand, and I don't want people to listen to this and think that, like, this is a really frequent thing, because you're just going to come across as an asshole in sessions. But, like, I can think back to a case I had where it was the dog had bitten the child in the face. I think the child required plastic surgery or some shit like that. It was like serious case, right? And it was because the kid got in the dog's bed. So, like, of course, immediately you're going to management strategies. Okay, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. I think you should probably crate your dog, so that, because it's just a little toddler, so they can't actually get in the dog's bed. Oh no, I don't want to use a crate. It's like really ugly in my room.
Oh, like, come on.
And I was like, in my head, I'm like, your kid just got bit in the fucking face, and you're worried about the crate being ugly. And this person was really, really awkward about it. And I think if I was less experienced at that point, I would have tried to find a way of appeasing her.
I get it.
But I realized, because I got that case at a time where I had enough experience to know better, I realized there was a moment there where I had to draw the line in the sand and be like, well, this is my opinion. This is what I'm telling you. I think you should do from a safety perspective. Obviously, it's up to you if you listen to it or not, but I think that this is really, really important, you know? And I had to have that conversation with a lady, but, like, that can get you in a lot of trouble if you're less experienced in that situation and you're like, okay, well, you know, and maybe we can just try and keep the toddler, you know, like, you know, and you just try to keep the person happy. But actually, if that person then calls you back in a week and says, hey, my kid got bit in the face again, I was following your advice,
like,
you know?
Come on.
Sometimes you have to draw the line in the sand, don't you?
Yeah, it is, you know, quite, because we can talk about consequences and shit like that, right? Here you had, like, the consequence of giving bad advice is very, very high, right? Usually we don't experience that, right? But you do, you know, like the confidence that comes with practice, or I don't know, from being naive, it's also confidence, really, really help. Did you come across of the trainers that they would like really shout at people, or, you know?
Yeah. So we were talking about mentors in the last episode, and like my first mentor, if you want to call them that, was a lady that was local to me, and like it was just like she happened to be a friend of a friend kind of situation. So I went to work with her for a while, and she had this real reputation for like being like hard, you know, not on dogs necessarily, but just on people.
Yeah, this is like where we started that episode. Like,
did I talk about
like
this
no
Okay.
The premise of this episode, like, people are getting into dog training because they like dogs, but they not necessarily like people, and that could be one of the examples, right? If she was like that.
Yeah, so when I was shadowing her, because I would shadow all of her sessions and classes and stuff, she would make people cry regularly, like like all the time. Like people would be crying in the session because, you know, she would just be very like direct with people. But you know what the weird thing was for me is there were a lot of people that loved her.
There is some,
and I always thought that was weird, like, because I thought people are going home crying, and yet there are people that are like they really love the whole thing, and that this is going off on a whole side shoot, but there's a little bit of a weird thing about the dog training industry, I think, because it has those kind of military roots in a lot of ways. Some people are kind of expecting to be shouted at a little bit. And there are some people that don't mind that. I mean, there are obviously a lot of people that would be like, fuck off. Like, that's the end of it. But there are some people that like...
I don't know where you get those people from. Like, it is happening in the dog sports that, you know...
very
of course, we are very passionate about the dog sports and we want the dogs to do the best. And like some of the coaches, they will go fucking hard on people. Like, so people are leaving crying and this sort of shit. And like, I'm always like... Did you change the person's behavior so that led to success, or like did that improve the performance of the person? Because usually it gets like, you know, you're being shouted at, then you get more tense, then you make more mistakes, then there is more shouting, and it just doesn't get anywhere, right? But
I think you probably have to be a little bit aware, like self-aware of your own personality, because like for me, I probably err on this. Like naturally, I would say I'm probably too nice. So I have to be very conscious of like, there are times where I'm like, do you know what? You're being too nice. Like you kind of have to be a little bit, like you have to draw the line like we were talking about previously. But I think there are probably a lot of people that are actually like the other way and they're like, okay, you need to be nicer about this. You know? So probably a little bit of self-awareness is like helpful on this one. It's funny, we were talking about languages and stuff. I've had a lot of Polish clients and I've had it happen more than once where my Polish clients would be like, Nick, just tell us straight. Just stop trying to be nice. Just tell us.
Yeah.
I think that's a cultural thing.
Yeah. I think definitely we like cut the shit.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate it though. Yes, I do appreciate it though. It's cool.
I'm like that quite often. If it's like, come on, man, to the point.
Yeah.
Without all the fluff around it. So makes sense.
So one of the other things that I think people feel very awkward about in the beginning is like when they first start teaching and they feel like they stumble across their words, they don't know how to explain things. And I think this is just a little bit of a reassurance thing because I think that's normal. Like even now, if I have to go teach a class I haven't taught before, it feels awkward. Like I feel like I haven't got my rhythm on that subject yet.
Who you are speaking to? Like you are talking about awkwardness. Like this is like last 10 years in my life when I moved to this country.
Okay.
Like, trying to explain things in English to people.
Nah, I bet, yeah. So, like, for example, there was a time where I started teaching some scent work classes, and I felt like my rhythm wasn't there, like it would be with any other kind of class, because I hadn't taught it hundreds of times. It took me time to develop, like, what I refer to as a patter. You know, like before we started recording, we were talking about magic, and like.
You were talking about magic. Don't put me into the same box of like weirdos that are interested in magic.
Nerds, more nerds. But like, I'm the kind of personality I get really into shit, and like one of my like things I got really into is magic. And in magic, they talk about patter. That's the word they use.
Yeah.
So like, for example, if you're like doing a magic trick or you're explaining something to someone, you would develop a patter, which is kind of like a script. But but it's not like you're going to go write that down and then you're going to follow that word for word. It's more like you've just explained something so many times that you just have like a pattern, like you know how to say it. And I think that comes with time in dog training. Like when I teach in classes now, very, very often I can find myself zoning out. And I'm like, it's like when you're driving and like, you're like, oh, how did I get here? You know, whereas like I've explained this so many times that I can like almost kind of start daydreaming in the middle of an explanation because I've just done it a million times before. And for me, that's what I would call a patter. Like I have a patter when it comes to explaining these things. And I think that just comes with time. of just explaining something hundreds and hundreds of times, and that just raw feedback you're getting from the client of like understanding or not understanding, and then it gets tighter and tighter and tighter, like a comedian's set, right? Like where you get to the point where like you can explain things very efficiently just because you've done it hundreds of times.
But also like adjusting everything to the audience that you have, like something what I obsessed, especially at the beginning of my dog training career, is like reading people's reaction. So because you want happy customer, you want happy person that will succeed with their dog, right? Like I mentioned that on other occasion that what is the more important thing, trained dog or happy customer, right? Because you could say if you want to train the recall and have like 100% reliable recall, especially in the cases of predation, train with the e-collars. But of course, there will be people that are not comfortable with that, right? And they don't want to do it. And if you push them to do it, they will be unhappy. So, arguably you will train reliable recall if the customer will help you, but they will feel very bad about that, right? Or they not gonna go with your advice. And of course, we have like our own ways. And when I grew up to kind of realization that the happy customer is important, so people are, because this is our job. We are making dog human life happier, because whatever the problem is making people unhappy. Very very often the dog is happy. Of course, if you have like very, separation anxiety, we're gonna help the dog. But if you have like counter surfing or pulling on the lead, the dog doesn't mind, right? It's the person that minds that. So we want their life to become better. And you have like different tools in your toolbox or different way to address the subject. And when I'm talking with the person, I'm looking at those slight reactions and trying to read those emotions, so I know which way I want to go with that person. So because I'm aiming for their own success. And the same as in dog training. In dog training, we need a skill to read the dog's emotions so we can be better trainers. But in dog training as a profession, you want to also be able to read people's emotions or changes in emotions, so you can become a better human coach.
Yeah, this is really good advice. And I think sometimes as well, one of the things that can happen with dog trainers is you can go into the session and you can solve problems that the client doesn't care about. So this is actually something that you just reminded me of. When I go into a session or I start working with someone, one question I almost always ask is, what is your biggest priority? Like, what are the things, like in terms of your priorities, where are they? Because what I don't want to do is spend like an hour dealing with counter surfing when your biggest problem, like that's way down the list. Yeah. Like, and your biggest problem is reactivity. And then I feel like we've wasted an hour, and that's kind of how the conversation would go. There was one client I had, or I was sat in the kitchen having a cup of tea, doing the classic behaviorist thing. I promise I don't just drink tea.
So fucking British.
I promise I don't just drink tea. But she was telling me about her dog's problems, and the whole time this was happening, she had a Kelpie, and it was just barking, barking, barking. But with that high-pitched Kelpie bark, where it just like fucking goes right through you, like ultrasonic. And honestly, I could never have lived with that. But for that person, they didn't care.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, well, why am I going to solve this problem that is not a problem for them, even though it would drive me absolutely insane?
So there are things that are related, right? So, for example, a lot of reactive dogs, they have also noise sensitivity, and for people, it's not a problem. But if we address noise sensitivities, arguably we can help with the reactivity as well, because, the dog will experience less stress during a day and will be able to cope better with other things. But I was guilty of it at the beginning, where I was seeing the problem where there was no problem. And then I was like, you have to train this dog. And I'm like, I'm fine. We are living great. And then, no, you have to train the dog. Where actually right now, just relax. Like, people should be happy with their dogs and have those best relationships.
Different people
And
have
it's
different...
not my ego as a dog trainer to solve the problems that they don't need to be solved.
Yeah, they have different standards. I can't remember if I told this story before, but I had a client that the dog had dog reactivity, and it was one of those clients actually where we basically entirely resolved the dog reactivity. Like, the dog was like social pretty much afterwards. And I said to the client, okay, should we start working towards getting the dog off lead then? I think I told this on my podcast actually. And she was like, no, I'm good. And I was like, whoa, why would you not? Like, we've just gone through this. We just done this thing that's way harder. Yeah. Like, why would we not just go and just do the off lead training? But she didn't want it. She was just like, I'm happy with this. And I was like,
and like, who are we to tell people what to do with their own dogs, right? So, yeah.
Let's get to some funny stories though, because you alluded to the fact you have some, and I definitely have some. Do you want to go first or second?
No, you go.
Okay. I'm dying to tell this story, honestly. So, the weirdest thing I've ever had anyone do on a dog training session is we were walking through the park. This is a dog reactivity session, but like mild dog reactivity, like not like particularly bad. And the dog did a poo, and the lady, just while talking to me, bent down, picked up the poo with a hand and put it in the bag. No. And then just carried on walking, and just no reaction, just talking the whole time as if this was like the most normal thing to do. And I just was like, I was just in shock. Like, what did I just watch?
Oh man! Like, it is like this. There was a video like ages ago where when we had to wear masks, etc. Right? So there was like lady like walking with her like tiny dog, and the dog made a poo, and she took the mask off, like pick up the poo, and then put the mask on.
Oh man, that's disgusting. I just couldn't like believe that someone did that. I was like, does she realize she just did that? Like, why? I don't know why you would.
It's just beyond my understanding of the human behavior. Right?
One situation I had, which kind of like goes back to an earlier point that we made. I had a session where I went to see the lady, and she was really like anxious and tense, and I didn't know why. But anyway, She got her dog. We were going for a walk. She's going to show me some like lead walking and recall training and stuff like that. And we got to the park, and I said, do you have any treats or anything like that? And she put her hand in her pocket, and she pulled out like Moams. Do you know what Moams are? They're like candy, like sweets,
all right,
like human sweets. And like we just started laughing about that, like the fact that I asked her to get treats out, and she's got like human treats in her pocket, and then
she started feeding you.
So we were just
good, Nick.
So that just completely like calmed her down, like all her tension, and we were just like having a laugh about it. And then she goes, I was really worried you were going to be like a boot camp sergeant.
All right.
Because this was the idea that she had about dog training, was like she was thinking that I was going to be like really like regimented and strict and et cetera, et cetera. So as soon as we started like laughing about these sweets, like she realized that like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And she was so happy after that point. And I still really, I still see that lady every now and then. She's lovely. But I remember when we got back to her house, she like literally like shouted up at her husband. I can't remember what she used. Like, he's not a boot camp sergeant or whatever expression she said. And yeah, we were just having a good laugh. But it's interesting how there are a lot of people that go into these, a lot of dog owners go into these sessions with these ideas about like things maybe they've seen on TV or something,
But yeah, like definitely to finish up this conversation, like we as a professionals, like we are responsible for both parts, like dog training and teaching dogs to do shit, and coaching people and teaching them to do shit. Because very often you have to be better at motivating people to do the job rather than the dog to do the job.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to finish up, let's train dogs.
Right? Yeah, perfect. Yeah?